Alright, welcome back to a brand new video. So in this video, I'm going to go ahead and show you how we can connect to our WebSocket server from React, basically the front end. So if you haven't watched the first two episodes of this mini series of our NestJS tutorial, basically this is episode number 3 of the WebSocket tutorial. The first episode I showed you how to create the WebSocket server. The second episode we created a separate NestJS application and we connected from the server to that WebSocket server. Okay, and both of those applications are running right now. The one on the left up here, this is the WebSocket gateway. The one on the right is the consumer. This consumes the WebSocket gateway. Okay, and so in this episode, we'll just literally create a React project, connect to the WebSocket server using Socket.io. So what I'll do is I'll run yarn create React-app, and then I'll just call this React Nest WebSocket. And then I'll set the template to TypeScript. So let's just let this generate the app for us. And in the meantime, I do need to configure something for our NestJS socket consumer because our WebSocket gateway is running on a different port. It's running on port 9001. In the previous episodes, I had it running on port 3000, I think. But let me just change this. So over here in socket client.ts file, I'll change this to 9001, and then that should be okay. And I think that's all we'll need to really fix. So now when I run this consumer project, you'll see that it'll go ahead and connect to the gateway. So we are connected from another server. So in case you aren't familiar with WebSockets, you can connect to WebSocket gateways or servers from another server-side application. And you can also connect from a front application. So I just figured I'd mention that. Anyways, we are done generating our React project. So let's just go ahead and cd into that directory. And let's open up Visual Studio Code for this project. And what we'll do is we'll install the Socket.io library for React. So yarn add Socket.io-client. So that's Socket.io-client. And this will be the only package that we will install. And we'll be using this to connect to our WebSocket server. Okay, so we're done installing, so let's just run yarn start. And our React project should be running on port 3000. Okay, and let's just go ahead and let our project open up, and then I'll just move the window over here. Perfect. Okay, so we have our React project. That is great. So now let's go into our code for the React project. And I'm not really going to bother worrying about the other files. What I want to do is I want to go ahead and set up a context for our server, for our WebSocket client, I should say, not server, WebSocket client. So here's what we'll do. So I'll just go ahead and create a new folder in my React project, and I'll just call this contexts. And I'll create a new file, and I'll just call this WebSocket context.tsx. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and create a context for our WebSocket. So first, we need to import the create context method from the React library. And then we'll go ahead and import IO from the socket.io-client library. And additionally, we'll also import the socket class as well. Okay? And then what we'll do is we'll just create an instance of the socket by calling the IO function, and then the URL to our WebSocket server. So that will just be localhost, and then the port that it's running on, which is port 9001, I believe. Yep, 9001. Of course, you would have to change this to whatever your WebSocket server is running on. So if you're connecting to, if you're not connecting to a localhost one, if you're connecting to like the deployed version of your WebSocket gateway, you have to put that there. But since we're working with localhost, we're going to put localhost. Okay. In your deployed application, you would obviously pass in the domain, the host name of your server that's running on. Anyways, let's go ahead and create the WebSocket context. So we'll declare a variable, call it WebSocket context, and this variable will hold the value of the context. So create context is what we'll call. And then this is a generic type, so we'll set the type to a socket, which just basically means that this context will provide that value for us, that socket value. So the default value will just pass in socket like that. So we're passing in that socket instance in there. And then we'll just go ahead and export the provider. So we'll create a variable called WebSocket provider equals WebSocket context dot provider. You don't have to do this because when you import WebSocket context, you just literally reference WebSocket context dot provider and then use them as tags. I'll show you when we provide it. So we'll go into app.tsx right now, and I'll show you how we can actually provide the WebSocket for the rest of our application. Okay, so that way we have it defined, we have the socket instance defined in one place, and we can grab it from the context wherever we need in our application. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll just remove everything inside here. And we should get, yep, there we go. Yep, okay, so what I'll do is this. I'll go ahead and actually I'll also remove this as well. So I'll go ahead and reference the WebSocket context. And so that'll import the WebSocket context from our WebSocket context file. And I can just do this WebSocket context.provider and then pass in the value if I want to. But because we already exported this WebSocket provider variable, which is the value of WebSocket context.provider, you can just do WebSocket provider like that. You can do it either way. It really doesn't matter too much. Okay. But anyways, we'll pass the value, and the value is just going to be the socket. So we'll actually import this from the same file, and then that is how we're going to provide that socket value. Okay, so we're not defining the socket as a state variable in our component. We're just literally defining it in a file, importing it from that file, and then passing that as the provided value. So we're pretty much done with that. So now what we could do is we go ahead and create a component. And let me just create a new folder, call this components. And then here's what I'll do. I'll create a new file and I'll call this, let's just call this WebSocket. I don't really know what to call it, so I'll just call it a random name. And we'll literally just create an arrow function. So export const WebSocket equals arrow function, and then we'll return a div. And I'll just put an h1 in here. WebSocket component. Okay, and let's just take this component, let's import it inside app. This. Okay, and we are good to go. So we can continue inside our WebSocket component. So let me just exit this and this. So what we want to do in the WebSocket component is we basically want to use the WebSocket context so we can actually get the socket value. Okay, now let me just go into my app real quick just so you can see the changes. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll call use context, and then we'll pass in the WebSocket context that we created earlier. And then this is going to return to you the value of the context, which is just going to be the socket instance. So you can see that if you hover over this, right, if you're using TypeScript, it will tell you exactly what the return type will be. And you can see that it returns the socket. So let's assign that to a variable like this. And now we can hover over this and you can see that the type is socket. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to use the useEffect hook. Okay. And essentially what we want to do inside the useEffect hook is subscribe to messages that the gateway could send us. Okay, if you watched the first episode where we implemented the actual NestJS gateway server or the WebSocket server, right? Let me go to that project real quick. So this is the WebSocket server. Okay, you'll see that inside gateway.ts, we are emitting an onMessage event, which means that all of the connected clients, aka the consumers to this WebSocket server, will receive the onMessage event if they listen to it. So what that means is if we listen to that event, we can receive it. So what I'll do is I'll reference the socket instance and I'll call on, and this is just going to expect an event name. So I'll just go ahead and pass in the onMessage event, and then a callback function, which is the listener. So this function will be invoked when our socket client receives the onMessage event from the gateway. And keep in mind, I'm using gateway and WebSocket server interchangeably. So when I say WebSocket gateway, I really mean the same thing as WebSocket server. And vice versa, if I say WebSocket server, I mean the same thing as WebSocket gateway. Just wanted to clarify that. So we just console log on message. And then we'll just console log the payload that was sent from the gateway. Additionally, I'll also listen to the connect event so we know when the socket has connected to the gateway. Connected. Okay. And what we also need to do is we'll also add an empty dependency array so that way this useEffect hook only runs once. Okay. And then what we'll also do is this. We will also set up a cleanup function. So basically when the component unmounts from the DOM, what we want to do is we want to call socket.off. We don't want to close the socket, because if you close the socket, you're not going to be able to connect to it again unless you manually connect to it, right? But we don't want to close the socket connection. We just want to listen to events when the component mounts, and then when the component unmounts, we will unregister those events. So what we'll do is we'll call socket off, and then we'll just unregister the connect event, and then we will unregister the on message event. Okay, and then I'll also write a console log, and I'll just say unregistering events. Okay, so that way you can see everything that is going on. So let's go ahead and go into our component, and let's open up the console. Let's go into console. And right now you're going to see that we have so many errors, and the reason why we have so many errors is because it's talking about the cores. Or if I refresh the page, right, it's going to complain about cores, and that's normal because we are running our React app on port 3000, and the NestJS gateway is running on port 9001, which is a different port. And when that happens, you need to configure cores. So that's a very easy fix. So we'll go into NestJS Websocket tutorial, or the project that you are running the WebSocket gateway, and then what you'll do is right over here. So this my gateway class, okay, the one that has the WebSocket gateway annotation on top of it, or the decorator. You're going to pass in an object, and you're going to pass in a course property, and then that course property is going to map to an object, and that object is going to have a property called origin, and you can just pass in an array of domains that you want to allow cross-origin requests. So I'll just do HTTP ://localhost port 3000, because that is where our React app is running on. Okay, and this should pretty much fix that issue. So if I refresh, you'll see that we no longer have any errors, no issues connecting to the server. You'll see that there's no errors. It says connected over here, and then you'll look at the network tab. It is polling, okay, which is good. And yeah, that's great. So let's refresh, and you'll see that we have the connected being logged, which is basically happening when we successfully connect to the WebSocket server. Now, it's important that you understand that you need to call socket.off in the cleanup function, because if you don't, watch what happens. If I save, you're going to see that we get connected twice. And I think the reason why that happens is because I think the component ends up, I think it registers the connect event 2 times. So that's why when the component unmounts, because you can see that when I refresh, it actually calls the cleanup function, and then the component mounts again. Okay, so you need to make sure you call socket.off whenever the component unmounts. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of, you're basically just going to have duplicate events being subscribed, and you're going to get things that will happen multiple times. But doing this will ensure that you will only register the event once. Okay, so it's working great. So let's go ahead and test out the on message event. So what I'll do is I'll go into Postman, and I'll send events from Postman to the gateway, and then the gateway will send events to all the connected clients. So I am in Postman right now. I'll go ahead into the left side. I'll click new. Whoops. And then we'll click on WebSocket request, and then we'll change it from raw to socket.io. Paste in the server URL, or enter the server URL, which in our case it'll be localhost port 9001. That is where our gateway is running on. And then what we'll do is we will connect. So we're connected successfully. In the console, it should say connected. Okay. So right now we have one WebSocket gateway, and we have two consumers. We have our other NestJS API running on port 9002 that is connected to the gateway, okay? And we have our React app. So we have two consumers, okay? Two clients, two connections, okay? And so what we'll do is let's go ahead and send an event to the gateway that will trigger the onMessage event. So if we look at the gateway, it subscribes to the new message event. So from the front end, well, actually, yeah. So from basically the client side, we'll need to actually send the gateway this event, so new message. So I'll show you how this works. So what I'll do is I'll go into Postman just to show you how this works. We'll go over here, type in the event name, new message, and then we'll type in a message. We'll just say hi, click send, and let's look at the logs. So if I look on the right hand side, this is one of the APIs, the NestJS API that is consuming the gateway. That project, that application is receiving that event. You can see it gets the object, message, new message, content, hi. If we go over to our React app, you can see that it is logging on message event received, and then it logs the payload that we received from the gateway. Okay, so you know that it's working, and that's great. So cool, we can receive events from the gateway to our React app as well as our NestJS app. So let's go ahead and actually send events from the front end to the back end. So what I'll do is I'll go inside my React project, and what I'll do is I'll set up like a mini form or like a text box, text input field. So I'll just go ahead and set up an input field. We'll set the type to text. I don't really care about the label right now, so I'll just go ahead and leave that alone. And I do want to define a state variable. So I'll call a value, set value, use state. And we'll set the default value to be an empty string. And for input, we'll bind the value of our state variable value to that form field. Okay. And then what we'll do is when we are typing, so we'll listen to the onChange event for that input field. So on change, we'll go ahead and update the value, update the state variable value to whatever e.target.value is. And then when we go ahead and click on a button, right, when we click on the button, let's register the onClick event. So when we click on the button, what we want to do is we want to emit an event. So I'll reference the socket and I'll call emit, and then you just want to go ahead and pass in the event that you want to emit. So in our case, right, we need to go ahead and pass in the new message as the event, because this is the message that the gateway is subscribing to, and it's basically going to receive that event from the connected clients. Okay, so let's just go ahead and emit on message, or wait, new message, sorry. Okay, and let's go ahead and for the payload, let me just double check to make sure what the server is supposed to expect. Well, it's supposed to be any, so it's fine. So I guess we'll just pass in text. So we'll just pass in value like that. Okay, actually, you know what? Let me create a function for this. So on submit. Okay, and let me just take this, put this in here, and then just pass in on submit as a value for onClick. So what we'll do is we will send the new message event to the gateway. We'll pass in the value, and then we'll just reset the value to an empty string. And let's go ahead and test this out. So what should happen, the expected behavior, is we will go ahead, type something in the text field. We will click on the button. That will go ahead and emit a new message event to the gateway. The gateway will receive the new message event, and then it's going to go ahead and emit on message to all of the connected clients. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to our React app. So let's refresh. Okay, let's go ahead and type something. I'll just type hello world with an exclamation mark. Let's click submit, and let's see what happens. So we click submit, the text field resetted. Okay, the value our state variable value, reset it, which is good. You can see that in the console, we can see that it says on message event received, and then message, new message, content, hello world. Let's look at the console. Let's look at our terminal, I mean. You can see that our WebSocket server received the event. Hello world is the payload, right? That is being logged right over here. And if you look at the right-hand side, our other NestJS API that is consuming the WebSocket gateway is also receiving those events as well. So this is typically one of the ways that you would develop, a chat application. So you can pretend like all of these connected clients, the NestJS API, as well as our React project, you can pretend like those are two different users. And so when you send one message to, let's say, some chat room, right, every connected client will receive that message. Okay, obviously you would need to manage different chat rooms, different channels, but that's something that's for another video. But hopefully you can understand what's going on, right? You can see that we are receiving the events, right? And of course, when we receive the event, we emit an on message event again to all of the clients that are connected, and that is why on the front end we are receiving that event. Okay, and then you could do whatever you want with it. Right? Let's say, for example, on a front-end application where you are building like a chat app, right? You can have a state variable called, messages, set messages, and this could just basically be an array of strings or whatever you want. We'll just go ahead and set this to, I guess, a string array, like that. And what you could do is whenever you receive a message, you can just basically add that message to the array. Actually, let me look at the data real quick. Let me actually do this. Let me go ahead and real quick, let me set a custom type message payload. And we have content and message. They're both strings. So content, string, message. And I'll just set this instead of a string array, we'll set this to a message payload array. And we will type annotate data to message payload. And then what we'll do is we'll basically just add the data that was received from the WebSocket gateway to our messages state variable. So what we can do is call set messages, and we can take in a callback function, and then we can just take prev, and then we can just basically do this. We need to basically modify the array because we don't want to update state manually. So we want to basically modify the original messages array. So to do this for arrays, what we want to do is we basically want to return a new array because we don't want to modify the state. So we'll go ahead and do ..prev. So we'll take every single item that's already in the array. We'll use the spreader operator and then create a new array. And then at the very end, we will just add the data like that. Okay, you can call this whatever you want. I'll just call this new message. And I'll just pass it in like that. Okay, so this will basically add the new message at the end of the array. At least it should. And then what you can do is we can render all those messages. So I'll do that on top of our input field. So let me just put this inside a div like this, and then on top, what we'll do is we will go ahead and reference messages. So what I'll do is this: if messages.length is equal to 0, I'll just basically do this. I'll say, let me just set this ternary operator up real quick. So if the length of the array is 0, we'll just say no messages. And if I look at the app, you'll see that right now it says no messages. Let's refresh. Okay, I refreshed, no messages, okay. And if there are messages, we will just render them. So messages.map, message, and then we'll just return an array. I'm sorry, not return array. We will just map across all of the messages inside this messages array. And we'll just basically transform all of those message objects into JSX, and for the JSX we'll just have a div, and then we'll just have the message itself. So I'll just use a paragraph tag, and then we'll just reference message.content, Okay, and then let's refresh the page so we can reset the state entirely. Submit. Let's see. Oh, it's complaining about the key. Yeah, let's fix that real quick. Actually, let's not worry about that because we don't have a unique ID. But of course, on the back end, when you actually create messages on the back end, you would probably save it to a database. So that would return an ID, like a unique ID for that newly created message. So you would use that to set it as a unique key because we are rendering lists. So you need to make sure you set that. Okay, but let's go ahead and just send more messages. So you can see that whenever I submit, right, this data is being sent to the gateway and the gateway is returning it back to us. Okay, but every client would see it. So let me show you. Let me go ahead and duplicate this tab. So this is basically another, you can treat this as like another connected client. If you look at the console, you'll see that it says connected. If I were to duplicate the tab again, it would say connected, and it has its own unique ID. Okay, obviously we don't have any authentication, so you can treat each tab as its own connected client. But watch this. If I say hi, every other client is going to receive that message. Okay. Hey. See? Hi. Hello. And there you go. Every single client is going to receive that event. Okay. And that is how you can work with WebSockets in React. So that is going to be pretty much it for this video. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions for NestJS or anything related to WebSocket, definitely let me know down below in the comments. I really appreciate suggestions and video ideas. And if you need additional help, you can go ahead and join my Discord server. The link is in the description. And you can just post your question in a channel, in the help channel. And if you want the reference to the code, I'll leave a link in the description so you can actually get the code for all the projects for the React, NestJS, and the consumer project. So that way you have all three codes, you can run them, and you can test everything out yourself. So that'll be pretty much it for this whole video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Peace out.